So before you choose any watch, take a good look at Citizen. Watch for it.
I don't want to set the world on fire. I just
Charles.
Catherine.
Do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
No. What is it?
in my heart I have but one.
Share the fantasy. Chanel number 5.
BCTV! Our best show.
Good morning. Relations between Canada and the United States are always good. They're always peaceful. There's no danger of a war. But they get very edgy at times. You've only got to think back for a minute to Kennedy and Diefenbacher, Pearson and Lyndon Johnson, Reagan and Trudeau. With me this morning is the U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Paul Robinson, Jr., a man who has been considerably outspoken as a diplomat since he came to Canada. And first this morning we're going to tackle him on, of course, the lumber crisis. You'll meet Mr. Robinson a little later. And then in British Columbia, we've got a very tough woman called Barbara Foxwell, who told the Social Credit Party what she thinks of the backroom boys. And she has, to some extent, suffered. The big question still is, will Barbara Foxwell of the Social Credit Party quit or will she not? Here it was her offence.
Bill Bennett led us to victory in '75 for the same reason. They didn't rely on government by Gallup poll and high-paid political flats. That doesn't win election, people do.
Then they asked me to resign. And I said I didn't see that I should resign because I had not, in my view, done anything wrong. I had merely expressed my opinion, and as far as I know, this country is still a democracy. And not only that, but I was elected by the women, and until the women told me that they didn't want me anymore, then I was still their president.
So Barbara won't quit. Maybe Bernie Smith will quit. Also on the happy side of the news this morning, we've got Lyle Kristiansen, the NDP MLA from the Kootenays. More bad news about a plywood mill closing down. What's the winter going to look like in the Kootenays? But first, after the break, Ambassador Robinson.
Yes. God knows what they'll do. Yeah.
Mr. Ambassador, it's no exaggeration to say that all of British Columbia is on tenterhooks over what seems to be a distinct possibility that you in the South will add an extra duty on BC lumber next June, and if you did, we're down the tube. What encouragement can you give me that as your best trading partner and your best friends in the whole wide world,
yes,
that you're going to treat us with generosity and not with bureaucratic savagery?
Well, I think that what's going on now, the International Trade Commission's ruling yesterday was only a preliminary ruling. It's part of a judicial process, which if it goes full course, will not culminate until late next spring. Frankly, I think the Canadian interests have a story to tell. And I think when that is done, I would hope that we'll be able to solve this problem.
Very diplomatic.
Yes,
You're confident the problem will be solved.
Indeed.
Now, if I were a lumber worker in Sedro-Woolley, Washington, and Portland, I'd say, Mr. Robinson, you're one of Reagan's boys. We get $8-9 an hour. These Canadians up there are getting 14, 15, 16 bucks an hour. They have a very generous stumpage system. They don't have to buy their lumber. You must protect us against this cut-rate Canadian lumber that is taking away the jobs from Washington and Oregon. And how would you respond to that?
Well, that hasn't been proven yet. This is what these hearings are all about. It isn't known that there is subsidy, for one thing. And that's what, as I say, has to be determined by, the next step is the Department of Commerce. There is 80%, by the way, Jack, of the U.S. lumber industry which supports the Canadian position.
Oh, I realize that. The big boys support the
Big
Canadian
boys, yes,
position.
that's right.
But you've got to look after the little boys too.
That's
haven't
right. Well, main thing is we've got to make sure that it's fair and it's right.
Our position, of course, is that as far as the financing of our trees is concerned, that it's done with government help, whereas you're a good old free enterprise when it comes to buying logs in the Northwest.
Well, we bid from 3 to 5 years on lumber areas and for cutting purposes. The Canadians, you have a sliding scale based on
market value.
Market value, yes. And so there are differences in that respect, and that's really what has to be delved into.
One final question on that segment. Is a decision to be made in Washington in June a political decision or, in fact, a straight quasi-judicial bureaucratic decision?
I'm afraid the second half, quasi-judicial bureaucratic decision.
So if
it's not a political decision.
If the worst came to the worst, though, we could still be rescued, the BC lumber industry, by political action by the Reagan administration.
Well, I would say so.
Do you think we would be?
Well, let's say first that I don't know all the facts, nor certainly does the Department of Commerce as yet. It's a quasi-judicial procedure, as you say, and it's ongoing, and so I couldn't prejudge it.
You're not going to prejudge that?
Well, I can't.
Wouldn't you be inclined to say, if we were just having a quiet cup of coffee, look, you changed the rules of the game on us, on your national energy policy, and you expressed that view very strongly, did you not?
Yes, I have.
Would it not might be time for a little bit of tit for tat from the Americans against the selfish Canadians?
No, there's absolutely no linkage between the United States policies on one as opposed to other issues. We simply do not link.
You still believe, however, that the Canadian government was unfair, do you not, in changing the oil investment policies and chasing foreign companies out of the country where it can?
Well, I think that the NEP is a wrong measurement. I think that the retroactive back-in is unworthy of Canada.
Do you find it significant? That was good. The retroactive back-in is unworthy of Canada.
Yes.
Do you find it significant that the government, our government, appears to be backpedaling its Foreign Investment Review Committee toughness?
Well, I think it's very welcome to us. 9 of the 10 premiers oppose FIRA in its present form. There have been some changes in the rules on FIRA, which we think are positive. And also there have been personnel changes at 2 levels in FIRA. And frankly, my feeling is that it's the Canadian government and the Canadian people that really are bringing about this change in FIRA. I think there will be a change. I think the administration, the FIRA administration, will become more responsible, less secretive, and so I'm hopeful that there'll be some real progress in that area.
But what must be done from a U.S. point of view, from a White House point of view? What must be done before we find, once again, big American investments in this country, which we need so badly now, many people think, for jobs? What must be done?
Well, I think in the first place the climate has to improve, and let me say, Jack, that it has. 3 weeks ago, Secretary Schultz was here, was in meetings with Minister McKechnie. I was in those meetings. There were 3. They totaled 4.5 hours, and let me say this whole lumber question came up for a serious discussion at that time, as did many other questions. I think our relations are very much improved. We're being more frank with each other, and we're speaking out on the issues.
Well, you've certainly spoken out on the issues.
Thank you.
Haven't you? For instance, you're quoted as blasting the Canadian government for spending too much on social and welfare, but not enough on defense. Should we be ashamed of our contribution to defense in North America and Europe?
Well, in the first place, let me say that I didn't say that about welfare, but I've received so many compliments on it that I'm not going to run around and deny it. Secondly, I have been consistent in expressing America's hopes that Canada will play its full part in the NATO alliance and the defense of the North American continent.
Well, mind you, as an ordinary tax-paying Canadian, I must admit I get a little discouraged when your U.S. Navy tests don't like the F-18, and we're committed to $5-some billion to buy one a month for potentially an unsafe plane for years to come.
Well,
how do you tell me as a Canadian that I should go ahead with that
in the first place,
deal?
it is certainly a safe plane. You know that. And secondly, you're going to buy 138 at a cost lower than the Navy will be buying it. And finally, the test that you're talking about, problems, has to do with payload in terms of the use of the F-18 as a sea-launched attack aircraft. Since you don't have any carriers, you don't have any problem that way. But as a fighter, it can't be beaten. It's the best aircraft there is.
The world is dead set in a nuclear freeze. Are you close to an agreement with our government on the testing of this cruise missile?
Yes, it's absolutely certain that it'll go ahead. In fact, we're the ones that have, on a technicality, have held it up on mere wording having to do with funding in case there was some damage to Canadian property. So it'll carry on. I've been involved with it for a year now, and I can assure you that the Canadian government will go ahead with our request.
That's for the testing in the Canadian North of this highly mobile, very effective, aggressive weapon.
Well, it's not an aggressive weapon.
It can carry multi-warheads.
Yes, it can.
And can hit a target within 100 yards or something.
Well, we want to make sure that it can hit a target at least within 100 yards, and that's why we need to test its guidance system over Canadian tundra, which closely resembles the Soviet tundra.
Could I call you a hawk?
Yes.
Soviet relations?
Yes, I think that the only thing the Russians really understand is strength, and particularly military strength.
Makes me shudder a little.
And I think we're all frightened of what could happen. I think it's easily the greatest issue in the world, and it has been in my lifetime, as to whether or not we destroy ourselves or whether we learn to live together. And I think there's nothing that's more important than this whole issue.
But you do accept the description given to you by the tiny perfect columnist that your attitude is that of a John Wayne gunslinger.
Well, he's a heck of an entertainer, that fellow. In fact, if I were to, I'd have to pay good money in the States to get that same kind of reputation.
Webster and Paul Robinson, the U.S. ambassador to Canada, after the break. Mr. Ambassador, this is Paul H. Robinson, Jr., right?
Right.
You made your money in what?
Well, I was a broker in group insurance and mutual funds, and we had offices in the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and London, England.
And you had a political appointment?
Yes, I'm a presidential appointment.
Presidential appointment. You're one of Reagan's boys.
I am, a Reaganaut.
All right, and you think he's doing a hell of a job?
A great job.
And will go on forever?
Indeed.
Even if he is a bit old to be president?
Doesn't matter. I mean, Churchill, Adenauer, and de Gaulle were all older than he will be after he completes his second term.
Let's gossip a little bit. Let's forget the issues just now.
All right.
I've just finished reading a fantastic book by a fellow called Martin, Presidents and Prime Ministers. Have you read it?
I've read parts of it. He's inaccurate on many things, including his remarks about me.
Inaccurate?
Yes.
Oh, I don't remember what he said about you. Oh, yes, he did. He said you were the least qualified ambassador
Yes,
appointed to Canada in decades.
Yes, you've been there, yes.
Yeah, of course, I've got it marked.
Yes.
A Chicago businessman with a strong anti-Soviet bent. He's right in that.
Right, yeah.
And listen to this nasty one.
Yes.
Possessing neither diplomatic experience nor a sound knowledge of Canada, he was quick to develop his shortcomings. Have you bumped into this Martin?
No, no. But, you know, I've founded 6 businesses in 4 countries. And in order to do that, you have to be somewhat of a diplomat.
Right.
And besides, I'm of Canadian descent. My great-grandparents were Canadians. They came from the Kingston area. I've always admired and loved this country. I've been here traveling and as a businessman for many years. In fact, I even read the Globe and Mail for 8 years before I was even appointed.
And that's a chore. That showed your dedication to being appointed Canadian ambassador.
That's right. That's how I knew of this fellow Martin, so I didn't pay any attention to what he said.
Listen, will you do me a favor, Ambassador?
Yeah.
I want you to check a story for me.
Yes?
He tells a hysterically funny story now.
It's the Pearson one.
This is the Pearson and Johnson, where he says that Charles Ritchie watched Johnson lose his temper and pick Pearson up by the shoulders, just like a beagle?
I don't know, but I'm going to find out. It's Edgar Ritchie.
Oh, it's not Charles. Edgar.
I believe it's Edgar. I know Edgar, so I'm going to check with him. I'll check it. I'll let you know.
Would you? I'd really like to know.
I can't imagine, even though Johnson wasn't anything like smooth, I think it would be a terrible rudeness to have done that, and I question it.
Yeah, because Johnson was very mad at Pearson at that time because of the speech he made against the Vietnam bombing, as I recall.
Yes, that's right.
All right, let's get back to issues.
Cambodia bombing.
It was the Cambodia bombing. BC and the Yukon, as we all agree, are in a very bad economic state at the moment. Can you give us any encouraging words on what's going to happen on the Alaska gas pipeline, which was to come down first in 1983, and now I'm told is not expected, if ever, until 1987? Because that's a lot of jobs, a lot of money, great for our economy and great for your industry.
Yes. Well, I'm very strong for the pipeline, Jack. I was disappointed to see 6 months ago that it was deferred for 2 years. You know, it has to, in order to go, it has to be privately financed. And the last price tag on it was $43 billion. Now, the reason it was so high was that, of course, we had higher interest rates then, and they've come down some. But we also have falling energy prices. I'm hopeful that we'll build the pipeline unless there's some scientific breakthrough that shows that there's an easier or better way to do it. It's helpful to us, it's generous of Canada to allow the United States to bring its natural gas down from Alaska to the lower 48. It's good for Canada because it'll open up the Northwest, just like the CPR opened up the West 100 years ago.
But it won't be tomorrow, that's for sure.
No, it won't be, no. But I think and I hope that as things stand right now, it will be built.
If you were categorizing the problems between Canada and the United States at the moment, and I haven't even mentioned acid rain because that's largely so far an eastern problem, what would you put at the top of our list of troubles across the border? Well,
I think acid rain is your highest priority. Ours is the National Energy Program. The retroactive back-in. And of course, one of the joint issues is the pipeline, as we've just discussed, and defense.
Because our defense spending is way below what the Americans think it should be. Is that not so?
Well, that's right. It's, in fact, only Luxembourg spends, in the alliance of 16 nations, spends more or less per capita than Canada.
Yeah. Looking at Canada as a whole, however, does it not strike you that compared to you, still a free enterprise country, we're practically a socialized nation, soft and a bit flabby with all our welfare spending?
No, you can't get me to bite on that one. I mean, I don't get into those things. I wouldn't say there's anything soft or flabby about this country. It's a great country. It's going to be greater. And I think to some extent that Canadians are a little too introspective. They're too self-critical. We went through all that silliness in the 60s, and we're not going to do it again.
Yeah. Mind you, you've put your foot in it now and again with your remarks about separatism. Do you regard separatism as a potential threat in the east or west of Canada?
No, not in either east or west.
Not in either.
I was far more concerned about it when I first came to Ottawa 15 months ago than I am now. I think, frankly, the average Quebecer, and certainly having just come again on through the 4 western provinces this week, I don't think the West or Quebec will separate. When it comes right down to it, all Canadians are, in my view, Canadians first.
The inside version of the Trudeau-Reagan relationship says that Pierre, our intellectual, shrewd, elitist Prime Minister, my description, not yours, tended to lecture Mr. Reagan with somewhat disastrous results on the economic aims of Canada. Is that not a real cause for concern when you have two leaders that don't really get on that well? Different generations.
In the first place, that's wrong. You've been reading that from people who have been saying that sort of a thing. I've been in 3 meetings with the Prime Minister and the President, and I can tell you that both men get on very well as men. They don't always agree, but they get on well, as I said, as men. There's a mutual respect and an appreciation amongst them. The atmospherics are very good, and I can just tell you, as a result of it, it makes my job a great deal easier.
I'd like to tackle some phone calls from Western Canadians.
It's all right with me.
On issues.
Any issue.
Now, to Paul H. Robinson, Jr., the U.S. Ambassador to Canada. You call him. after the break. Paul Robinson, the U.S. ambassador to, I almost said to Ottawa, but it's to Canada. There are places outside Ottawa that they don't know about. You realize that?
Well, I've been to all of them.
I don't know where the questions will go. I don't know if it'll be lumber or cruise missiles or what.
Yeah.
Go ahead to the ambassador.
Yes, hello, Jack. Mr. Robinson, I was almost enjoying you somewhat until you started speaking about the cruise missiles. And you said that it's almost a foregone conclusion that our government is going to allow you people to do it. You might be interested to know that as far as our government goes, the actual people of the country are deadly against the testing of cruise missiles in Canada.
Okay, Mr. Robinson.
Well, I wouldn't say that they are deadly against, as you've said. We don't think that at all. We know that the government has publicly stated that it will go ahead with this agreement, so I don't see that there's any point to carry on this discussion. But let me honestly say that in the first place, Canada is doing this pursuant to her obligations as a partner in the NATO alliance. And secondly, the cruise missile, of course, will not be armed.
Yeah, the one in Canada.
The one in Canada.
That's rather an important point to remember. They're only testing the flying capabilities.
That's right. That's exactly
the target
right.
capabilities of it.
Yes, that's right.
Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, Jack, that you agreed with them on the fact that it's not going to be armed and trying to make that look significant. The important part is that it is going to be tested in Canada, and that will be a step towards an arms buildup, and it is a first strike weapon.
Okay, is it a first strike weapon?
No.
Okay,
It's
hang on.
not a.
No, it is
the
not.
ambassador says it is not a first strike weapon.
That's BS. It's not true, and their policy is a lot of nonsense. And Jack,
I can barely hear you on this call, old boy. I'm sorry about that.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
Could you do me a favor and you've cut me off in this before, but I would. I've heard you once say before that broadcasters have an obligation under the CRTC to promote.
That's correct.
National unity. So, would you ask this person a little bit about the allegations about CIA involvement in Canada?
CIA involvement.
Well,
Tell me all the secrets.
Well, you better ask him about it, because I don't know of any CIA involvement in Canada. All of our work is done with in cooperation with the Canadian government, and
it's a silly
that's all I can
question.
say. It's a silly question.
I mean, if you knew, which you may or may not, you wouldn't tell me anyway.
No, that's
It's
right.
just daft.
Right.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
First of all, I'm sorry to disagree with the other callers, but you're a breath of fresh air from the United States, and if ever you get unemployed, maybe Canada should hire you to go back and sell some of what we're trying to do to Canada down there. Because looking and listening to you this morning, you're a breath of fresh air. That's all I've got to say, and I thank you for coming, and I appreciate your time, and keep doing the thing for Canada.
Well, thank you very much, and let me say, if we can't talk openly and in a straightforward manner to each other, who can we talk to?
Mind you, you're not supposed to, are you? Or is that old? There's that old type of diplomacy.
We do all the regular quiet diplomacy, but in the case of Canada and the United States, we also do open, what I call open diplomacy. We speak our minds.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm against the cruise missile being tested here in Canada. I think, I'm not anti-American, don't get me wrong. I think we could do something else to show our alliance in NATO. Is there anything else we can test up here except that damn thing?
Well, you see...
You got lots of room in Nevada. Why don't you test it down there?
No, you see, it's the Canadian tundra is close to that of the Soviet Union, Siberia, and that's why we want to use Canadian terrain to test the guidance system of the cruise missile.
And it's our contribution to NATO under the obligations. Is that correct?
It is indeed, yes.
Horrible though it is.
Well, the guidance system isn't horrible. What would be horrible is if the Soviets attack us, we would have to reply, and one of the ways we would do so would be with the use of the cruise missile.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Welcome to Canada's version of Boston, Massachusetts, hotbed of liberalism and socialism. Sir, the socialist opposition leader of BC threatened yesterday to cut off all flow of natural gas, hydro, and or clear water streams and rivers to the U.S. if you come out with the tariff. Therefore, would your only alternate viable course be the Alaskan natural gas pipeline from Alaska?
First of all, just let me cut in. Davy Barrett, the NDP leader and former premier of this province, did say yesterday, with great hyperbole, that if you countervail the duties on lumber, no gas, no hydro, no water over the dams, and he said that was not a threat. Do you forgive him for that kind of remark?
Well, frankly, you know, whatever might have been said is no great concern. He's not in power, is he?
No.
And if he was, we just have to go to Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba.
Fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Mr. Ambassador.
Yes.
In the light of the colossal international blunders your government have now made on foreign policy, do you accept or believe that a nuclear war is winnable and can be waged in part or on a small basis?
No, I don't in any sense assume that a nuclear war is winnable or that can be waged on a small basis. I think once, if a war were to break out and turn into a nuclear war, it would be almost impossible to contain, and that's why I'm so concerned about our SALT negotiations, or our START negotiations in Geneva, where we have proposed to the Soviets that the missile warheads be reduced on both sides by 1/3.
But can there ever be, what do you call it, supervision of the disarming of nuclear missiles?
Well, if we could ever trust the Russians, and if we could ever get some kind of verifiable reduction, yes, I think we could scale down this arms race.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a question and a comment. The comment is, I wonder, you know, I'm an ex-American myself and a U.S. Navy veteran from World War II. And my observations have been that the United States has been responsible for the arms race ever since the end of the Second World War. And the question is, why is such a wonderful, freedom-loving country as the United States so fond of supporting dictatorships all over the world?
Well, in the first place, we are not responsible for the arms race. The Soviets are the ones who have embarked upon an unparalleled arms buildup over the last 20 years following the Bay of Pigs, or following the missile crisis, rather, 20 years ago. And secondly, we're not fond of supporting anybody except people who are friendly to this country.
You talk about freedom, yet you support dictatorship.
Who says we do?
Why did you overthrow democracy in Iran and install a dictatorship?
You better send a book to him.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Ambassador, and welcome.
Thank you.
It's quite stimulating to hear you. I'm very sick and tired listening to most of our socialistic friends on the television, and also thank God for the cruise missile. I feel I'm able to go to bed at night that the Americans do have some protection for us because we don't have any of our own. And thank you.
You know, what we want to is reestablish a credible, is to reestablish a credible deterrent. The cruise missile is very important in doing that.
Mr. Ambassador, keep your eye on this countervailing duty.
I will.
I personally don't think it's going to happen because of the U.S. lumber interests in Canada.
Yes, well,
I think that the lobby on our side will be busier than the lobby on the softwood side.
Well, I don't want to prejudge it, but I can say this, and having been with the Council of Forest Industries yesterday, having seen them a year ago, having gone to the cutting operations on Vancouver Island, my feeling is that they will, A, get a fair hearing, and B, they've got a story to tell.
You let me know whether or not Lyndon Johnson...
I will. I'll get back to you on that.
Pierce not by the ears. Not by the ears, by the coat.
I'll get back to you on that.
My thanks to Ambassador Robinson, U.S. Ambassador to Canada. Next, Barbara Foxwell, Social Credit, after the break. One doesn't often get internecine political fights in a party out in front. But Barbara Foxwell, president of the Socred Women's Auxiliary, attracted a lot of attention by her very outspoken remarks about Bill Bennett. And Bill Bennett was losing touch with the party. That's what you said, wasn't it?
I said, yes, in essence I said that the government as a whole was losing touch with the party.
Tell me, is it the boys in blue like Spectre and Kinsella who upset you more than anything else? Do you really think that Bill Bennett has been isolated by these people he brought in from Ontario?
I was looking at it more from the party point of view. As you know, we've got the same situation in the party that a lot of people have been appointed. They're not all from outside BC, some of them are from inside BC. But there has been a hierarchy set up there over the last couple of years in which gradually these people who were brought in to advise in the running of the next election campaign, and with that I've got no quarrel whatsoever, but they've gradually encroached upon the running of the party itself. And what has happened is that these people have now come between the membership and their elected directors, and I think the same thing is beginning to happen over in Victoria.
And therefore your view perhaps a couple of months ago was that Gallup polls are no, it was time for Bennett to go on an election, and you'd like to have seen him go on that.
Oh, no, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but what I do say is that he shouldn't have been relying on Gallup polls to make his decision.
Now, did you annoy the party brass by giving out some stuff which they said was confidential?
Well, that's what they accused me of, but in actual fact I gave out 3 statistics, and 2 of them I did not get at a board meeting. One of them was I got in general conversation with members of the board. One I worked out for myself by counting on my fingers, and the other one I have since been told was also not confidential.
Well, now, how much do you say the party is in debt at this moment?
The last figure that I know of was $350,000.
In debt?
In debt.
How many people work at campaign at central headquarters?
Well, I can't tell you the exact number, but it's around 20.
How much does it cost to run the fancy offices of Social Credit in Richmond?
In excess of $1 million last year.
That's a lot of money for a provincial political party, and you'd like to see that tightened up and tautened up and some economies made.
I'd certainly like to have a really good look at what's going on, and the thing that really bothered me is that that money is coming straight out of the members' pockets.
In these times, in these troubled times.
That's right.
Now, how did this meeting come about? Did they actually, who are they, first of all?
Which meeting are you talking about?
When they asked you to resign.
Oh, well, as a regular thing, the day after the annual convention, there's always a board meeting. This was not a special meeting. I expected, of course, to be called on the carpet.
Because of the media coverage you got.
Well, yes, that's
attacking
right.
the Socred establishment.
That's right, yes. I don't know if they were expecting me to turn up to that meeting or not, but I decided I was going to go. And they decided they would tackle the issue of me before the regular board meeting, and the meeting was supposed to start at 12. It was a little late starting because of the roof-raising ceremony, and then we had our own roof-raising ceremony inside that boardroom.
I see. Who led the attack on you, Bernie Smith?
Well, Jack, one thing I really don't want to get into is the personalities involved. I'd rather, if you want to know that, you ask them.
Yeah, that's what I, of course, want to get into, you see.
I know, but, you know, I don't think it's fair.
Are you going to resign?
Oh, heavens no.
How long is your appointment as president of the Women's Auxiliary?
Until the next annual convention.
That'll be next year?
Yes.
And can anybody fire you as such?
The only way in which I interpret the Constitution, which of course is our Bible, that I could be got rid of, is if a general membership of the Women's Auxiliary were called and they demanded my resignation, and then, of course, I would respect their wishes. What
support have you had from the members whom you've run into since this little crisis?
I have had absolutely fantastic response, not just from the women, but from the party, from people who are ex-Socreds, from NDP, from the general public who don't have any political affiliations. I've absolutely been overwhelmed by the response.
Bunch of bullies reducing you to tears.
Yeah, it was pretty tough.
Fair enough. Let's go to the phones now. Do you think Barbara Foxwell should stick it out or quit? No. There's a lot of NDP calls perhaps saying quit, but we'll try and judge them for ourselves. Or should we go back to the good old days of W.A.C. Bennett, which was really one-man government? After the break. Yeah, you knew you were going to cause trouble when you made that speech at the Women's Auxiliary, didn't you?
Yes, I did. It was a very hard decision to make.
Bill Bennett call you after it?
No, he didn't call me. I went to see him of my own volition.
Was he unhappy?
Well, he was a little stunned, but he was very gracious, I must say.
And he didn't try and shut you up as such.
No, no.
But somebody's trying to shut you up. Go ahead. Should Barbara quit or stick it?
Yes.
What should she do?
I think she should stay.
You're a good social creditor.
Well, not exactly. It's just that if she quits, she's going to be finding herself taking a back seat from now on, and it'll be tougher to maintain her head-on position. I know this through my own personal life sort of thing, and I've taken a back seat once, and it's hard to regain.
Were you a former executive assistant in social credit?
No, I'm unemployed right now, but I think she should just stay with it.
Okay, go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello?
That's you.
Yes. I'm of no political affiliation yet in BC. However, I'm really impressed by Barbara's stand, and I hope she sticks to her guns, and we need more people stepping up and saying what they think to the politicians.
Thank you very much.
Take a bow, Barbara.
Thank
What
you.
really is wrong with social credit nowadays? Are you not disappointed in the performance of the government by and large?
Well, I think it all stems to the thing that the issue that I was trying to bring out, that they're not really listening to the membership and to the general public.
I mean, I can't understand why, for $72 million, they would cut back on the renters' tax credit. Can you?
Oh, this is really what made me make such a strong statement, because I knew when that came out on Wednesday evening, and I don't see television very often, so this was really stuck in my mind. I knew that the next morning at the Women's Convention, 25% of the delegates there were people who were going to be directly affected by this, and I couldn't go out there in all honesty and give them the usual rah-rah, gung-ho, everything's lovely speech. I just couldn't do it.
Good for you, because that renters' tax credit was quite perhaps the most unwise decision they could make at this time.
Well, it seemed so silly to me, in my innocence, because it's such a small amount when you think of the total budget and the total potential deficit.
I mean, it wasn't Van der Zam who had upset you, was it?
Oh, no. Oh, no. I think he's terrific.
You're all for Willie. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
I want to congratulate you, Barbara, for having the courage to speak out against this Bennett government. In this country of Canada, we've got two great disasters, Trudeau and Bennett. And if you want to do the right thing is to leave and join the NDP to help and defeat Bennett in the next election and save this province.
Will you do that?
No, I certainly won't. I don't believe that Mr. Bennett is a disaster at all. I think maybe he's a little bit off track right now, but he's not a disaster.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
I'd like to say, Barbara, that I really admire the courage of your political convictions. I may disagree with you on your choice of Bennett being NDP, but it's marvelous to see that kind of courage of conviction, particularly right now where, well, politically speaking, BC is a bit weak, in my opinion.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Oh, yes, congratulations. It takes courage and integrity to take such a stand. And anyway, we need you, whatever party you're with. So congratulations to you.
Well, next thing you'll be seeking a nomination in a riding.
Oh, no way.
You sure?
No, positive, absolutely positive.
Power goes to your head.
No.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
I'd like to congratulate the lady on your program today on her stand. I am none of the affiliations. I'm not affiliated with any of the political parties here in BC. I'm from the East. But we tend often to vote the person and not get in on somebody's coattails. So I'd like to see that there's somebody in that party that's trying to keep them honest. So keep doing it.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
Hello. Yes, I congratulate Barbara, too. I think she's doing a wonderful job. She certainly knows all the facts that have been going on. And stick to it, Barbara. Remember, you have to fight for what you want today.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
I think she should be congratulated, and I wish there was more people that would speak up.
Good.
Thank
That's
you.
10-0 so far.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Go ahead from Port Alberni.
Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning.
I'm very happy to see you taking your stand. I'm a grassroots person myself, and I think we need to get down to common sense as much as possible. And I'm also for all the way through, right from the bottom to the top. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, please.
Hang in there, Barbara. I like your approach, and I think the party needs somebody like you to, spruce them up a bit. Take care.
I'm rather overwhelmed.
I know. Even though you vote Tory federally, you're still a social creditor provincially.
Oh, how do you know I vote Tory federally?
All social creditors vote Tory federally because you haven't got a national social credit party. Go ahead, please.
I'm a Socred who's 100% behind your gutsy stance in this matter, but I think you did use poor judgment in the extreme in coming out with this in public. You can bet your boots that if this had happened among the NDP, the media would be busy sweeping the whole thing under a rug. All you've done is given our Socred-hating, Socred-bashing media something to talk about and magnify for over the next year or so.
He's against you. He's against you.
Yeah.
There's some truth in what he might say, though, is there not?
Well, I'd like to say one thing, Jack. He talked about the Socred bashing media, and sure, you know, we get a little bit paranoid about it sometimes. But I must say that this past week, every single media person I've spoken to has been very kind, very understanding, and the press that we've received, I can't talk about the television because I haven't seen it, but the press that we've received has been very, very fair.
That's the most unusual statement.
Yes, but it's
Isn't
true.
it? Now, Socred bashing media, there was I stuffing a question down the American ambassador's throat this morning to embarrass Barrett. Now, there's no skin off my nose. Who gets embarrassed by a question of mine? I want to ask it anyway.
You know, politicians tend to be paranoid about the press
And
anyway.
I love that little bit where Robinson said this morning, Barrett, he's not in power.
That's right.
It's a good clip. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yeah, it's you, ma'am.
Oh, yes, Barbara. 100% behind you, and the women will stand solidly there, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
From Terrace, BC, go ahead.
Good morning, Barbara.
Morning.
Good morning.
Dear lady, you're such a wonderful, nice breath of air in this political scene here in BC. Please keep up the good work and don't back off for a minute.
Go
I have
ahead,
no
please.
intention of backing off.
Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm really impressed with that woman's guts. We need more of that, and I hope she sticks with it. And I also want to say a couple of things about Bennett and Barrett. I'll always remember Barrett for ICBC, which is making money, and I'll also remember Bennett for Brick Resources. I rest my case. Thank you.
Brick Resources.
Yes.
He was an NDPer, but he said he liked you anyway. Go ahead, please. Come on, ma'am.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Good morning.
And to Barbara, I would say hang in there.
Thank you very much.
And there we'll leave it hanging in there. It was about 20-1 in your favor, Barbara. Bernie Smith, if you're listening, 20 calls totally in favor and 1 call partially in favor. So whoever did it did the wrong thing from a PR point of view. My thanks to Barbara
Thank you
Foxwell.
very much, Jack.
Next, we'll go to an NDP fellow from the Kootenays by the name of Kristiansen or something about more bad news in the province after the break. Kootenay West. Lyle Kristiansen, member of the House of Commons, NDP Kootenay West. More bad news yesterday from BC Timber, and I don't suppose you're blaming BC Timber for it this time, are you?
Well, BC Timber and the government that gave it birth, Jack, the bad news was that yesterday, out of a clear blue sky, in the middle of a meeting which was called between the regional district, the city, the union, and the company to discuss ways of making the operation viable, BC Timber's 2 vice presidents suddenly announced that the permanent closure of a plywood plant threw 160 people off into the street, and it's going to be devastating for the people in the community and the community at large.
You mean there was a meeting going on at that time to try and consider ways to keep the plywood plant going?
Yes, there'd been a joint, about a month prior to that, there was a joint committee set up composed of BC Timber, IWA, City of Nelson, Regional District of Central Kootenay, plus the member of the legislature, to consider ways and means of making the operation there more viable, both the sawmill and the plywood plant, and attempting to restore some confidence in that community. This meeting, halfway through one of the briefs presented, and there was some very detailed briefs there with a lot of work gone into them, BC Timber just came in and said, we don't want to talk anymore, we've decided to shut her down.
Was that Voigt? Who was that?
Voigt, Ken Voigt and Ken Halliday.
Now, had that plywood mill been closed most of the summer?
Yes, it has. The better part of the last year, it's been on indeterminate layoff in the same situation as the sawmill.
And no markets, down?
That's in large part the problem. BC Timber suggests there's a log supply problem. That's been disputed. They promised the IWA some months and months and months ago to give to them some of the information that they'd based their decision on earlier, the lack of proper logs for peelers, etc. But that information, that promised information, was never delivered either to the union or to the community.
BC Timber's statement apparently is that in fairness to the employees and partially in response to union and other requests, BC Timber has decided to close the mill now and pay severance benefits of about $1 million. Is that not valid? Surely it is.
The decision, the agreement by BC Timber to extend seniority protection until a decision was either made to keep the operation going or to shut it down came 3 weeks to a month ago after considerable community pressure, because BC Timber originally was just keeping people on tenterhooks, not letting them know what was happening. And it was that initial pressure that caused BC Timber to maintain some health coverage for benefits and
seniority
to
for
say
severance.
that they wouldn't use a cop-out and deny severance simply because the seniority list had expired. So that was after first community pressure. It was no good, good deeds on their part.
So that means $1 million in severance, but it's closed down permanently, the plywood mill.
The plywood is, yeah.
How about the lumber mill?
The sawmill, we still don't know where that's going.
Is it open or closed?
Oh, it's closed. It's been closed for some time as well. The first employees actually were dropped from the seniority list of the plywood plant just about 2 weeks ago in October. And before many more months have passed, there'll be a lot of people expiring from the seniority list at the sawmill as well.
What's going in Nelson just now? With the plywood mill permanently closed, the sawmill down for the foreseeable future.
Well, it's a major administrative center, and so apart from people working for the government and people shining each other's shoes, and well, some people in the education industry, there's not much else there. The CPR is in the process over the next year of scaling its operations down still further. That's the information we have. BC Tel has some layoffs that have been announced for a year. They're relocating some of their centers, so we're in trouble.
You people in Ottawa don't even turn up for sessions of the House of Commons. The Deputy Speaker's got to close down the debate because you're all having fancy, lengthy suppers.
Well, lengthy suppers. We were only allowed about 20 minutes that night because the Speaker, in a screwball decision, decided to call a vote right smack in the middle of the dinner hour. There was no reason to adjourn the House that night, but that's a side issue.
No, it's not, because people think, look at all the problems in the country and they can't even turn up for an evening session. You say that was an unfair image to give all parties on that occasion.
Well, it was, but the major reason for it was the Tories, by a deliberate strategy, had decided that they wanted to embarrass the government by keeping their people out in the lobby.
Playing little kids' games.
Oh, yeah, yeah. They were saying the government's concerned with getting their agenda of business through, then they better show up to do it. And they weren't going to help.
Have you done anything in Ottawa lately at all?
Well,
being our elected representatives, have you done anything positive at all for the economy?
The only positive things that have happened in Ottawa since we came back into session was to stop some of the bad things that we were going to do as a result of the two previous budgets. The taxation northern benefit allowances, that's been withdrawn and scaled down. The taxation of health and welfare benefits
What's your field of criticism for the party in Ottawa? What are you critic for?
Forestry and post office.
Forestry and the post office. And there's nothing happening in forestry and the post office.
Well, all the wrong things are happening with the post office.
Okay, an NDP MP here this morning, Lyle Kristiansen. If you want to call from Nelson with good news, I'd be delighted to hear from you or anybody else. To Lyle Kristiansen.
So would I.
After the break.
Oh, there's a lot of Nelson. Well, the mayor.
I was just asking Lyle how things are in Nelson just now, coming up to the middle of the winter.
Pretty disheartening, and this news from yesterday certainly isn't going to help any. One of the most horrendous experiences I've ever had in my life was this summer visiting some of my former workmates out of the mills in Nelson, and especially the Italians who, I'm not stereotyping, but they may be Catholics, but they've got the strongest Protestant work ethic of anybody in the country. And to see these people who, many of them, they don't even buy their homes on credit, who have a second and third home that they rent out. The tenants are moving away. Their pride is hurt. They don't know if and when their operation is ever going to open up again. And it's absolutely devastating to see what happens to those families.
So what would be the percentage of unemployed in Nelson at a rough guess?
Official statistics range about 25–30%, but that's in the city itself. It must be closer to 40–45 if you take the surrounding area.
If you haven't got a government job, a BCGEU job, a provincial or federal job, you're in trouble.
Either that or in education.
This call is from where?
This is I'm a former plant chairman of K-Ply.
Okay, you're speaking from Nelson.
Yeah, speaking for Nelson.
Okay, Chris, carry on to Lyle or tell me what you want.
Okay, Lyle, I'd just like to suggest that as far as BC Timber's corporate citizenship goes, these people have been quite treasonous in their treatment of the people in Nelson. They've betrayed their employees. They've betrayed BRIC's original mandate, and by doing so, they've betrayed the people of BC. Not only by BRIC, but by the government that set up that company.
Okay, give me more on that. Why would it be treasonous?
The mandate of BRIC originally was to provide employment to people in BC.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I see here the way that they've provided employment. They've spent funds that they originally had to buy companies that were already in operation. They've never attempted, to my knowledge, to start a new venture or show any initiative in stimulating the economy of BC. And certainly as far as the plywood mill goes, the manner in which they've treated the people of Nelson is absolutely disgusting. They promised that study of the plywood mill time after time. The plywood committee requested it. We wanted to work with those people. We wanted to try to do the best thing that we possibly could for Nelson, and we were serious and sincere. These promises kept coming up. When it would be completed, we would see it. Finally, after it's become years now. After years of trying to get a hold of that study, we've been told that it's just not available. It's finished, but now it's going to be irrelevant.
Tell me, did they ask you for a rollback in wages?
Our wages were rolled back to zero, Jack.
You mean there'll be no increase, but you got your 13% last year, didn't you?
Well, we haven't been working since February 26th. How can you roll back a wage that doesn't exist?
Sorry, you got me cold. But what I was suggesting was, did they come to you and say, if you take a 20% cut, we'll reopen the plant?
No, that request was not made.
No point in making that to the IWA, is there?
No, never has been.
Good, well, thanks for your call, Chris.
Well, I hope you can raise a little bit with them, Jack, because
not with this government.
Has treated people in BC and in Nelson in particular.
Not with this government. You can't do anything. When they took over BC Timber into BRIC, it operates on a profit and loss statement, and if it's losing money, it'll be closed.
Well, I agree there. I agree that that's the way they treat people, but this is not the way that a homegrown BC company should be participating in the economy. It's absolute crap.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Would you suggest, Lyle, that this be kept open as an uneconomic operation with taxpayers' money? But that's what Davy Barrett often says. We'll take it
I
over.
think it would be proper for any provincial government to make a commitment to that community that they will keep the faith, and as soon as at least it's economically feasible to operate it, that it will reopen.
Instead of closing it permanently.
Yeah.
That's the point. I agree with that.
Let people know that at least they'll have a future someday.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
My question to Lyle Kristiansen. Good morning, Lyle.
Morning.
This is Slow Can Wally calling. Jack, just to familiarize yourself with the Kootenay problem, BC Timber went in there and purchased Nelson or Kootenay Forest Products, and they started to buy up all the timber rights that Kootenay Forest Products had and try to squeeze the small operators out of business by buying up all the prime timber leases. Lyle is more familiar with Slocan Forest Products. He's familiar with Klesnikos, which is non-union. They've forced out a sawmill in Castlegar. BC Timber was supposed to go into Nelson and increase the employment market for the people there, and they have done absolutely nothing. They've bought Kootenay Forest Products, and then they shut everything down.
Yeah, now the penny's beginning to drop now. You say that BC Timber used its clout to buy up other operations, to squeeze people out, and then close the whole thing down.
Exactly. They
You
went
agree
in
with
there
that,
and they
Lyle?
bought Kootenay Forest Products.
The thrust of it's correct, yeah.
The thrust of it's correct. Well, not much you can do about it at the moment, is there?
Well, I had to move from Spokane down to Vancouver to get work.
Have you got one down here?
No, you had an article last week on the Toyota plant. I tried to call you and to find out who I could talk to get a job.
The Toyota plant.
Toyota parts plant.
Yeah, I remember that, the $20 million deal.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pie in the sky for the moment. It's coming, but it was announced by Lumley and Phillips, but I don't know about that one yet. Go ahead from local 405 IWA at Nelson.
Yes, hello?
Good morning.
Good morning. Is that you, Jack?
Yes, carry on.
Close.
Come on,
Offerman from the IWA First Vice President Nelson calling.
Right.
I just want to second the comments from several of the speakers that we've heard this morning. I also have on the line with me Dennis Bannert, who is the third vice president of IWA Local 1405. He's currently laid-off employee from the plywood plant. I'm a business agent who's on leave from the plywood plant. Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I want to say that we're outraged by what we were faced with yesterday, and I want to say deja vu to what happened yesterday. It's a repeat of something that happened over a year ago. We managed to put together a committee involving all kinds of groups in the community, including representatives from various ministries, to try and find solutions for both plants. And they dropped a bomb on us instead before we could even put our brief on the table. We worked for hours putting together a brief, trying to suggest how that plant could become viable. And it became clear to us after yesterday's meeting that they just aren't interested. In 1981, after Brick first made their announcement that the plywood plant was a dog, to the total shock of the employees there, we attempted to prove to them that it wasn't. We started what was called an April initiative, and we dramatically increased the productivity after asking the management for the tools, the resources, and the information. We did that, and we asked in return for one thing. We asked that a joint union management chaired by a CEC individual through manpower adjustment committee be set up with funding from the federal government to try and make that operation viable.
And they
we wanted to put everything we had into that committee to try and make it viable. We were slapped in the face. We were said, no, we're going to do our own study. We don't need your involvement. We don't need grant money. But we'll release our study to you. Well, here we are. It's a black day in Nelson.
Well, you made a good case there, a black day in Nelson, and they wouldn't cooperate with you fully, and they walked into the middle of the meeting yesterday and said, this is it, closed down, permanent, not reopening.
Right, and I want to make one other point. On April 27th, the Minister of Lands and Forests made the point in a letter to our local MLA, Lauren Nicholson here, that it was his intention that any purchaser, if given approval by the ministry, would be required to continue the operation of the existing manufacturing facilities in Nelson. That's plural. We intend to hold them to that. We still have a case to make before whatever potential buyers there are, before the community and before the province.
Just a minute.
That plant could be made viable.
Did somebody suggest that the plant would be sold?
The BC Timber has taken the position for the last year, I guess, that the only thing that they're interested in is selling the plant. They're not interested in trying to see it become viable. The committee that was set up in the community was set up to try and attract the potential buyer and find ways and means of making that operation viable for a potential purchaser.
What are you going to do? Are you going to go down and attempt to see Bennett in Victoria? Maybe he doesn't even know what's happened up there.
Well, I would be very surprised if he did not know what's happening up here. We do have an emergency membership meeting set up for Monday morning. We will consider our options at that point. We do want to say so that, and in the broader context,
What we've seen here is that brick, which had a huge pool of capital when it first started off, sunk that money into coal, sunk it into North Sea oil, refused to sink the required amounts into their own operations within the forest industry, and now we're out on the street permanently. We understand the realities of the current market situation.
Give me your name again.
Klaus Offerman.
Klaus.
I met you before, Jack.
That's right. I just wanted to get it clear. Opperman or Ottoman?
Offerman.
Ottoman. Klaus, much obliged.
I have another man on the line here, Dennis Bannert, who's currently acting as plant chairman for the plywood.
All right, put him on for a minute or two.
Yes, I'm right here, Jack, and I just wanted to add to Klaus's comments. You know, Jack, it's a well-known fact that BC Timber is one of, if not the worst performer in the entire forest industry in BC at this time. You know, we have seen this coming for quite a while. Yep. BC Timber and brick over a period of time have gradually been removing local control from Nelson. When brick was formed and BC Coal was purchased, we saw the writing on the wall. And I just have to say, Jack, that
you expected it.
The decision we don't believe is an economically sound one. I think it has to be pointed out that, for one thing, the reason that the lumber industry in BC is still doing anything is because of the U.S. Exchange rate differential, and if that disappears, certainly the lumber industry in BC is going to suffer. And additionally, if there are any tariffs forthcoming from the United States as far as BC lumber going into the United States, then obviously the lumber industry is going to suffer even more. At the same time, the plywood industry, our plywood industry, has never dealt with the United States. It's been in Eastern Canada, and the fact is that if that industry improves in Eastern Canada, we may see that the plywood plant here in Nelson could become the only possible viable operation here in Nelson. But I think, Jack, I have to point out that this decision certainly has to point out to us the need for communities, and particularly the communities in this area, to stick together in defense of our primary job base, because what we're seeing is a massive realignment all over the place in terms of control of our resources.
Good.
And it is in the interest of our communities to stick together and demand that the timber and the resource in our area is processed here, and that's one of our primary concerns.
You're both excellent spokesmen for your case, and I don't blame you for being more than a little bit irate about the apparently one-sided arbitrary decision by BC Timber, which belongs to us, to close down Nelson. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jack.
Right. I'll be back after the break. Bit of a free-for-all, and Lyle Kristiansen will be here too. Funny how a phone segment on a story like this suddenly wakens one up. I get the picture right now. Nelson, British Columbia, where plywood and sawmills, apart from government services, have been a lifeblood of the community. That an effort was really being made by those in the community. For instance, it came out, Lyle, did it not, that it was the union guys who went to BC Timber, I went to Kootenay Forest Products, and said, look, we can improve productivity if you will do this and that.
That's right.
And they did improve productivity.
The workers in that plant have been involved in management through experiments in industrial democracy. They're involved in their community. They know what they're doing. They've shown the kind of cooperative spirit, both as workers and as citizens in that community, that everybody else says Canada needs. And here you have a chance to do something worthwhile and set an example for the whole country, and this wrecking crew in Victoria just comes and drops a bomb on it.
But the least they could have done was say, look, okay, we are closing it, but we're looking for a buyer.
Well, they're doing that too, and there's some suspicion. In fact, a statement released by the two members of the Regional District of Central Kootenay that were at this meeting yesterday suggested very strongly that they smell a setup to allow Crestbrook to now come in as a purchaser and only guarantee to keep a sawmill open. And that this lets them off the hook in trying to maintain both manufacturing facilities in order to get their hands and cannibalize West Kootenay's timber supplies.
All right, I can see that motive. It's always there where lumber is handled. But what about the state of this plywood mill? Is it an old junky mill?
No, the plywood mill just came into being around 1968.
It's a good mill.
Well, there are some problems with it, but the information that the unions put together suggests that a very minimal investment could bring it on stream. Now, we don't know what our lumber market situation is going to be as of next year in the United States. Things could change. But most of their plywood, almost all their plywood, goes to the Eastern Canadian market.
Go ahead again from Nelson.
Yes, I'm a local businessman in Nelson.
Right.
And number one, you're off the air in Nelson right now.
Why?
I don't know. I'm on Nelson Cable, and you're off the air at the moment. And but the question I have is, definitely the economy's affected here, and things are pretty gloom. And I'm just wondering how many of these employees, or ex-employees, are involved with tree planting. Okay, you're back on the air now.
Good.
And the reason I'm wondering is the whole Nelson area, right up to the Lardo, Slocan Valley, the areas are badly logged, and as far as I'm concerned, nothing's growing back. And I'm just wondering if during this bad time, if they can be used to help get it back again.
Any propositions on the table about that?
There are a number of Kootenay Forest Products, Kootenay Plywood employees working under the Employment Bridging Assistance Program on forestry projects in the area now, but that program has had some real problems and hang-ups with it as well, in terms of people not getting paid.
Or not being on long enough to re-qualify for UIC.
That's right. In fact, you get cut off your regular benefits in order to go to work for them. And it's a terrible situation, but there's a lot of work to do in that whole area in reforestation, but that takes time to get it on stream because we don't have the seedlings in this province.
Well, now, both these operations have been up and down all summer, haven't they?
Down all summer.
Down all summer.
Down all summer, down for a good half a year.
What is this latest closure going to do to your business in Nelson?
Well, the effect has already hit Nelson. It's been here for a while now, since the summer, and I've just tightened my belt, and I'm learning to live with it. I've lost lots of friends. They've moved on to other things. And what I'm worried about is the economy in whole here, and I'd like to see possibly the Valhalla Mountain Range turn into a provincial park while we're in this bad time. Now it's the time to push for it, and I think tourism is going to be really important until the logging industry gets back on its foot again.
What kind of business are you in?
I service and sell TVs and stereos. And the young couples that work there and the older couples, they brought a lot of good money into the area. So it hurts.
Well, thanks for your concern.
You're welcome. Bye.
Go ahead. Go on.
Yeah, there's one message that I'd really like to give to the provincial government, and that is that there is a long-standing policy in terms of the timber resources of this province, which is called use it or lose it. And I would ask this provincial government, although I don't have much hope that they'll respond to it, or any other possible provincial government, to adopt exactly that same policy, use it or lose it, when it comes to the industrial plants on the woods base of this province.
Yeah, fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Am I on the line?
Yes, you are.
May I ask a question that doesn't concern the forestry project?
Yes, you may.
I'd like to ask, good morning, Mr. Kristiansen and Mr. Webster.
Yes.
I'd like to ask a question concerning the news this morning. I heard something I couldn't believe my ears, and that was that the Liberal government was planning to cut COLA to pensioners down to the 6-to-5 formula.
That's correct.
That's correct, is it?
That's correct, and it's
I tell you what, I'll hang up and let Mr.
Okay, let Mr.
comment
Kristiansen.
on it.
Right. That's correct. Under the 6 and 5, the increases to pensioners will go down 50 cents a month, I believe, to come to just over $250 when the 6% ceiling comes in on the old age security increase.
That's right. That was first announced in the late unlamented Mr. McEachin's budget of June 1982.
And they're sticking to
we're
that.
currently awaiting for the government to bring that bill before the House of Commons, and there's going to be hell to pay over it. There's no way we're going to let that get through without a long, drag-out
As
fight.
far as old age security is concerned.
As far as old age security
But a lot of
is
people will be
concerned.
very unhappy if you fight for the indexing of civil service pensions to go above the 6%. There were 900 well-fed, well-paid civil service pensioners in Ottawa last night complaining about their restriction to 6 and 5.
Well,
That's different.
I don't have many federal employees in my riding, but these people have been paying into pension plans, into contributory pension plans, and they've been paying extra premiums for indexing, and they're entitled to get what the devil they pay for.
No, they're not, because they don't pay the money in. It's a paper book entry. Nobody in this country can finance unlimited indexing of pensions, whether it's Ray Perot's, Jack Austin's, or federal civil servants on the new levels, not on the old
When
level.
governments in this country start paying a proper rate of return on their employees' investment in pension programs, and it is the employees' investment, no matter how it's worked out in their agreement or government policy or what it is, they're entitled to get the benefits that are paid for. If they weren't getting it one way, they'd be getting their wage
You're in danger of
packet.
getting caught up in your own hyperbole, because if you want high interest rates, God help housing.
Yeah, what's their connection?
20%, you want to get them 20% in their pensions if that happens
You
to
want
be
to
the
get a
rates?
lot better than the 4, 6, 7% that is normally gone to
Do you
people in
want to
this
give
province
federal
or the rest
civil
of it.
servants unlimited indexing?
We're not talking about unlimited indexing.
Where are we? Let's not get off on the wrong foot. Where am I? But there is a crisis in Nelson.
Yeah, there sure is, and
It's a black day in Nelson.
I don't know if anything short of a new provincial government will get us out of it, and I'm not entirely convinced that even that will do it either.
Well, that's generous. Thanks for being here,
Okay.
Lyle.
I'm glad to be here
Our
anytime.
concern for the people in Nelson, I'll tell you, and I'll be back after the break. Northeast coal with Basford, mining industry with Adam Zimmerman of Noranda, and politics with Bill King of the NDP. That's on the table right now for Monday morning at 9 a.m. precisely. Well, it's been not a bad week this week. One of these days we'll have nothing but good news instead of a succession of concerns about the state of the economy. And I'll be back with Basford, Zimmerman, and King. It's not a legal firm. They're all in public life. Monday at 9 a.m. precisely. Author of all kinds of things. Exoneration, separation, a rude book whose name I will not... Balls. Periscope Red. Richard, you're dreadful.
Why,
A chancellor of a university. What the hell's this one about?
This one, don't throw it down like that. Treat it respectfully.
Oh, no, just a minute.
Wait,
just a minute.
wait.
Stop.
What? What?
Come on.
Oh.
Get a good shot.
What
of
is this?
Shh.
British Columbia.
You see that?
Sherman Hines.
Let's try this camera. I want a better shot.
Well, that's a very conservative book. There's no question about
British
that.
Columbia by Sherman Hines. I wrote the foreword to that book.
Go.
Schneider is known officially from here on as Macho Man, the Incredible Hulk.